At the center of a cold, intense military courtroom that will take your breath away is a man who does not belong to this era, Sergeant Elias. His uniform is unlike any in the room, sleek, with symbols that no one recognizes yet. He's come from the year 2050. No, back to 2025, here to fight, but to fight for his dog. Next to him is a dog kennel made of bulletproof glass and reinforced with titanium steel 10 times harder than aircraft shells. And inside, a German Shepherd unlike any other Rex. He's no ordinary K9. He's part flesh, part machine, a product of biowarfare and loyalty. He was sitting there with one eye glowing faintly, amber yellow, and the other eye long gone, lost on a rescue mission to save Elias's life. But to Elias, Rex was not a weapon, nor a tool. He was family and a comrade who valued loyalty above life, a soul that stayed by his side through every firestorm, every collapse, even after Elias returned home and the nightmares never stopped. But now, Rex's existence is as fragile as the last autumn leaf before a winter storm. Elias stands up slowly, voice steady but heavy. He pleads with the tribunal, not as a soldier, but as a man. Please, don't take him from me. Don't shut him down. But the council has already spoken. Rex is considered a temporal risk. They say his technology, his memory, his enhancements could disrupt the past, could fracture the timeline. Their decision? Rex would be demobilized not temporarily, but permanently. Not in 2050, but here and now, via remote self-destruct. Those words made Elias choke, as if a rock was pressing down on his chest. Even the judge, Hallstrom, a man of cold logic and strict codes, lowers his gaze. He doesn't want to say it again. But he does. The dog must be destroyed, within the hour. Those words were more powerful than a bullet piercing his shoulder on the battlefield, sending him to his knees with his hands clenched into fists. But behind the glass, Rex tilted his head ever so slightly, as if he had known this outcome all along. The judge finally relents. You have 15 minutes, Sergeant Elias. Say your goodbye. Elias felt helpless at this moment, more helpless than when he and Rex fought 10 enemies alone. He nodded once with his lips pressed tightly together. And as he kneels beside the crate, placing his hand on the cool glass, memories from the future flood his mind. Of smoke-filled skies, of gunfire, of Rex pulling him from the wreckage, of nights when the only thing that kept him grounded was the steady heartbeat of a dog who never left his side. In that silent courtroom, surrounded by weapons, politics, and timelines, one man is about to lose his best friend, and this is where it begins. Back in 2050, the world has changed completely, with skyscrapers floating, cities filled with humanoid robots doing street work. And in the shadows, another kind of battle was being fought, one you wouldn't see on the news. It wasn't just about land or power. It's about time and the past. Elias lives alone in a cramped apartment on the edge of New Denver, one of the few remaining ring cities after the collapse of the Pacific. With injuries to his body and soul, he chooses to live alone with a dog who follows him wherever he goes. Rex, the German Shepherd, was more than a companion. He was engineered, spliced with biocircuitry, enhanced reflexes, sensory AI, built to be smarter, faster, and stronger. But it is not a machine. It is warm, loyal in understanding every command, the kind of soul that didn't speak in words but never needed to. As Elias has seen his friends fall in failed missions, Rex has remained by his side. He'd drag Elias out of burning rubble, sit beside him during rehab, silent, patient. He'd sense panic before it hit, bark before a memory took over. In a world built on synthetic loyalty, Rex was something real. And then came the call. The military knocked, not at the door but through a secure transmission burned straight into Elias's neurochip. Sergeant Elias, you are being recalled to 2025. They don't want you back in combat. They want you back in time with a scheduled hearing, not for a mission, but to give Rex his final judgment. The tribunal had discovered a breach in the past, something Elias did that had never been logged. A moment during the war when he refused to activate Rex's self-destruct protocol. He broke the rules to protect his dog, his teammate, and somehow, it changed the timeline. Now the council wanted judgment, and Rex was part of that judgment. The order was clear: return to the past, stand trial, and witness Rex's deactivation, so that the future could remain untouched. Yes, Elias was ready to face the past. First, he put on his special suit, walked through the cold corridor where he first met Rex, and stopped just a second before entering the time vault. As the buzzing sound faded, the door of the time travel ship closed with the lights on board blinking. Then the wall seemed to bend, and a few seconds later, Elias had arrived. He was back in 2025. The air grew heavier and quieter, as if the world had yet to realize how much was about to happen. He stood outside the courthouse, straightened his uniform, and took a deep breath before stepping through the tall iron doors. Inside was a different kind of battlefield. No bullets, no smoke, just a panel of judges, cold eyes, and a very familiar dog kennel. And the soldier from the future had returned home. Not to rewrite history, but to hold on to what history had no mercy on: the love of family. The doors of the tribunal chamber creaked open with a mechanical sigh. Elias stepped through, his boots echoing against the polished stone floor like a steady heartbeat in the silence. Sunlight from the high, narrow windows cast sharp beams across the room, painting him as a figure caught between light and judgment. At the far end, the High Council sat in rigid formation. 5 figures draped in slate-gray robes, faces as unreadable as the steel walls behind them. Judge Hallstrom presided in the center, his presence commanding without needing volume. The tension in the room felt like static in the air, thick and unspoken. Elias marched to the center podium, shoulders squared, every movement measured, deliberate. Behind him, 2 guards wheeled in the containment unit, a transparent, reinforced cube humming faintly with magnetic locks. Inside, Rex stood perfectly still, eyes tracking Elias's every move. A deep, modulated voice spoke. "Sergeant Elias, you've been recalled across time to face charges of protocol breach, timeline interference, and refusal to execute a high-risk asset termination during wartime operations." Elias met their gaze, unflinching. "That asset has a name." A murmur passed through the rows of military advisors behind the tribunal. One of them, Admiral Kellen, leaned forward. "Sergeant, the being you refer to is not human. It is a military prototype constructed for combat support. It contains critical data, possibly corrupted. Your refusal to initiate its auto-destruction placed dozens of lives and the integrity of the temporal continuum at risk." Elias inhaled slowly. "And he saved more lives than I can count, including mine. Your emotional attachment clouds your judgment." "I didn't override that protocol out of sentiment," Elias replied. "I did it because it was wrong." Judge Hallstrom held up a hand. "Let's see it." A screen descended from the ceiling with a silent flicker. A recorded feed from 2050 began to play. Shaky footage from Elias's suit cam, explosions, smoke, screams, and then, through the haze, Rex charging through gunfire. A wall of flame and shrapnel roared toward Elias, but Rex leapt into it, shielding him. His body absorbed the blast, data stream flickering. The final image froze. Rex, bleeding and burning, still standing between Elias and death. Gasps rippled through the chamber. One of the council members looked away. Hallstrom's voice was quieter now. "That footage is classified. You weren't authorized to retrieve it." I wasn't authorized to bring a ghost across time either, Elias said. But here I am. Then a motion from the prosecution's side. A young technologist stepped forward, Lieutenant Nira Vell, holding a control device. We've confirmed, she began, voice shaking slightly. Rex's neural interface contains embedded combat logs, encrypted command data, and fragments of quantum signals. The unit must be neutralized before reintegration into the past corrupts mission threads. She raised the device. With Council permission, I will initiate the failsafe protocol. No. Elias's voice cut like steel. I modified his command core. The failsafe won't work. A stunned silence. Explain, Hallstrom demanded. Elias stepped forward. I adjusted Rex's firmware, not to prevent his destruction, but to give him a choice. He's more than a machine. He learns, he decides. And if he wanted to self-terminate, he would have. He didn't. The tension rose like a tide. Some council members exchanged alarmed glances. Others whispered into neural comms. Hallstrom's jaw tightened. Sergeant Elias, the judge said, you've admitted to altering critical military hardware, violating multiple ethics protocols, and resisting chain of command. Do you understand the weight of that? I do, Elias answered, softer now. But I also understand what Rex gave up for us. I won't let his story end in silence. Then, something unexpected. A soft whine from the containment unit. Every head turned. Rex had moved just a fraction. His gaze swept the room. Then he barked, a single low sound, as if answering a call no one else could hear. Elias turned toward the crate, eyes shimmering. You know me, boy. You remember. The control panel in Lieutenant Vell's hand beeped, then blinked red. Fail-safe override. Confirmed, she murmured. We can't shut him down. Panic flickered in the tribunal. One general stood. He's a loose variable, a living threat to temporal security. Or, Hallstrom countered, rising from his seat, he's a soldier who kept his oath. As the room fell silent outside, the sun hovered just above the horizon. You have until sundown, Hallstrom continued speaking. Say your goodbye. After that, Sergeant, you will surrender yourself, or face exile beyond the timeline. Elias nodded once. I understand. And as one by one they left the court, Elias remained, and the crate door opened with a hiss. The hum of the courtroom faded into the background, as if time itself was holding its breath. Sergeant Elias stepped forward, slow, deliberate. Each footfall echoed against the marble floor, the sound of a soldier walking toward goodbye. In front of him stood the containment unit, bulletproof glass, cold, clinical. But behind it was Rex. He wasn't just a dog, not just a machine, not just a weapon. Rex was his heartbeat on the battlefield, his anchor in a storm of nightmares. And now, the government had ordered him to say goodbye. 2 guards flanked the unit, silent, unmoving. A tribunal officer stood by, holding the control tablet, the one that could end everything with a single touch. Judge Hallstrom's voice echoed earlier in his mind. You have 1 hour. Use it well. Elias stepped closer, stopping just inches from the glass. He lowered his head, pressing his forehead gently against it. On the other side, Rex stirred. His remaining eye, glowing amber, focused on Elias. He moved forward, slowly, and touched his snout to the glass. A connection. Quiet, profound. No words needed. From his jacket, Elias pulled a small recording device. He knelt down, placed it on the ground beside him, and whispered in a choked voice, as if he was about to cry. We're not supposed to leave anything behind. But this moment, they'll never erase it. Elias recalled, one night he was in a coma after an explosion thrown by an enemy. His mind was broken while he didn't want to wake up. But Rex didn't choose to leave. Instead, he chose to push his nose towards Elias's head and pulled him back from places no one else could reach. Time unraveled around them, and suddenly, Elias wasn't in the courtroom anymore. He was back in that lab, the first time they met. Rows of biomechanical prototypes lined in silence until one lifted his head. One dog, Rex. Protocol said no contact until clearance, but Rex had walked right up to Elias. He stopped before Elias's eyes and then chose him. From that moment, the war changed. Patrols, firefights, insurgencies. Rex was more than code and muscle. He was instinct, courage, compassion. Now, Elias reached into his palm. A silver coin rested there, glinting faintly. It was a backup time node. One press, and he could escape this timeline. But he didn't move. Elias lifted the coin, looked at it, then placed it, silently, atop the recorder. The tribunal officer stepped forward. "Sergeant Elias, we need the code." Elias looked at Rex, then back at the officer. "No." Murmurs filled the courtroom. Panic. Shouts of protocol breach. One of the council members rose. "You're jeopardizing the integrity of the timeline." But Elias stood firm. "I'm keeping a promise. He saved my life, more than once. I won't trade that for convenience." The officer tapped the override. The tablet flashed red. Override disabled. But no reaction occurred. "You altered the system?" "I rewrote the protocol," Elias said. "You can't take him from me." Immediately, the guards moved and their weapons were raised. But Judge Hallstrom remained silent, and then he stepped forward to Rex's kennel before turning to Elias. "You disobeyed orders. You will be held accountable. But I don't see danger in that dog. I only see loyalty." He took a breath before continuing. "You have until sundown. After that, you surrender willingly or face exile." Elias's jaw tightened for a beat before he gave a small nod, his voice barely above a whisper, etched with reluctant acceptance. "Understood, Nishin," he said, though every fiber of his being wanted to scream against it. The heavy doors closed behind each figure. The guards left first, their boots echoing with finality. Then came the tribunal, murmuring in clipped voices, avoiding Elias's eyes. The spectators followed, slower, glancing back with a mix of awe and confusion. Until finally, silence returned, and only two remained: a man built by war, and the dog who made him whole. With a breath that trembled at the edge of resolve, Elias reached toward the console. His fingers hovered above the biometric scanner. Then, slowly, he pressed down. A soft chime echoed, followed by a series of mechanical clicks. The locks disengaged. The airtight seal hissed as the chamber released, and the containment door creaked open. Elias stepped back, eyes never leaving the glass. "Come on, boy," he whispered. "You're free. For now." He stepped out. Carefully. Slowly. Each paw placed with silent intention, his body moving with the precision of old training. Every muscle taut, every breath measured. The glow in his remaining eye scanned the quiet room, assessing, remembering. But there was no threat here. Only a man, his man, standing still, waiting. And then, like a whisper of comfort from the past, Rex's tail, low and steady, swept gently against Elias's leg, grounding them both in the moment that time itself dared not interrupt. Then, with the quiet dignity of an old soul who had seen too much, Rex stepped forward and gently pressed his head against Elias's chest. His ear nestled just beneath the soldier's heartbeat, as if trying to memorize its rhythm, the very sound that once guided him through the chaos of war. It wasn't just affection. It was recognition, a final, silent salute between brothers in arms, wordless and unbreakable. And Elias dropped to his knees, the weight of years crashing down all at once. His arms folded around Rex in a trembling embrace, holding tight, as if afraid the moment would vanish if he let go. And there, in the stillness of that empty courtroom, the soldier who had endured a lifetime of war finally wept. Not the sharp, stoic tears of duty, but the raw, unguarded sobs of a man saying goodbye to the only soul who had truly understood him. "Thank you," he whispered, burying his face in the warm fur. "For being more than what they built you to be. For being you." The sun dipped below the windows. The light stretched long across the courtroom floor. And still they stayed there, together. Not soldier and weapon, not man and machine. Just two survivors. Holding on to a moment the world would never understand. And somewhere in that stillness, the future, bent ever so slightly, toward mercy. They didn't run, they didn't speak, they just walked, step by step, shoulder to shoulder, like two fragments of the same soul, reunited for a fleeting, fragile moment of peace. The silence between them wasn't empty. It was full of everything they couldn't say. Every scar, every memory, every moment that had led them to this final walk beneath a fading sky. Down the empty hallway beyond the courtroom doors, Elias and Rex stepped into the hush of twilight. The guards didn't follow. No shackles, no commands, just that same unspoken grace that came after a storm. The corridor was lit only by the fading sun pouring through narrow windows, casting gold across the floor. Elias didn't look back. Rex walked in perfect rhythm beside him, tail low, ears alert, his gait slower than it once was, but proud. They continued on and entered a private courtyard within the government compound, perhaps forgotten by those who never needed silence to think. Elias stopped under a copper-leafed tree whose branches whispered in the late-day breeze. Elias lowered himself onto the old iron bench, its frame creaking softly beneath his weight. The metal was cold, but he didn't mind. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. At his feet, Rex circled once with practiced precision before settling into a watchful position, his body close, his breath steady, his eyes never leaving Elias. In that simple motion, there was trust, a quiet echo of every moment they had shared in the shadows of war and the silence of recovery. Elias slowly reached into the inside pocket of his jacket, fingers brushing against the worn leather case he had carried for years. He pulled out the old recorder, scuffed, aged, but still working, and for a moment, just held it in his hand. His thumb hovered over the play button. Then, with a deep breath, he pressed it. A soft click cracked the stillness. Then came a hiss of static, like the breath of time itself holding back tears. And then, Elias heard it. His own voice, quieter than he remembered, fragile, wavering, as if speaking across the years had drained it of certainty but not of truth. His voice echoed, fragile but real. "You stayed. When I fell apart. When everything burned and the sky felt like it was crashing down. You stayed. You didn't run. You didn't flinch. You just looked at me like I was still worth something, like I wasn't broken beyond repair." Rex looked up, one ear twitching. "They said you were a weapon, a prototype, a means to an end, but I knew better. I saw it in your eyes. You were never just built. You were born. You chose me." Elias paused the recording. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was reverent, like a chapel holding its breath. He lowered the recorder slightly, staring at it as if it were something sacred. "You chose me," he whispered again, this time not as a question, but a truth rediscovered. As if understanding, Rex stirred. The old shepherd slowly lifted his head and, with the tenderness of a goodbye that needed no words, placed it gently in Elias's lap. It was more than comfort. It was agreement. It was memory made flesh one final time. Night fell slowly. Stars blinked into the bruised sky, one by one. And then, as if time itself were exhaling, a faint buzz broke the quiet. Then, like a ripple cutting through still water, a faint chime broke the hush. A message flashed on Elias's wrist console. Code order, final enforcement. Subject must surrender before 9 p.m. He looked down slowly. The glowing digits on his watch read, 8:52 p.m. Elias sighed. Not angry, not afraid, just tired. He looked at Rex. They're coming. Rex didn't move, didn't blink, just watched him, calm, and Elias smiled. You always knew how this ended, didn't you? He stood slowly, brushing dirt from his knees. He looked up at the stars, hands still resting on Rex's head. But you stayed anyway. Lights flickered at the far end of the courtyard. Figures appeared, armed, cautious. A voice rang out. Sergeant Elias! Stand down. Elias didn't raise his hands. He didn't flinch. He only said quietly, Let me finish the tape. A beat, then a nod. He pressed play. If this is the last thing I say to you, let it be this. You were not made to follow. You were made to care, and you did that better than anyone. The voice trembled. Run free, my friend, wherever time takes you next. Run free. The tape clicked. The light on the recorder blinked off. Rex raised his head one last time, slowly, with the grace of an old soldier saluting a memory only he could see. His ears twitched, not in alert, but in farewell. His eyes met Elias's one final time, deep and steady, as if to say, It's okay now. There was no whimper, no cry, just that calm gaze, heavy with things no words could carry. And then, light pulsed, the air shimmered, time shifted, one heartbeat, and Rex was gone. No flash, no sound, just gone. A silence fell, not one of loss, one of peace. The lead officer stepped forward. Where did he go? Elias didn't answer. He didn't need to. He just smiled, closed his eyes. Time can erase records, but not loyalty, not love. And somewhere else, on a battlefield not yet written. A younger Elias turned at the sound of claws. Rex was running toward him, whole, alive, and free.